There's a difference between a man who feels desire and a man who is ruled by it. Stoicism is not the denial of pleasure, it is the mastery of impulse. Semen retention, when understood correctly, is not about obsession, guilt, or superstition. It is about command over self. The Stoics believe that nothing external weakens a man, not hunger, not temptation, not women, not pleasure, only a lack of discipline. Only the moment when a man chooses comfort over command. Sexual desire is not something to eliminate. That is the first mistake modern men make. The Stoics never taught suppression. They taught governance. Desire is energy. Energy, when undirected, becomes chaos. A river without banks becomes a flood. A fire without a hearth burns the house down. Sexual energy is the most powerful biological drive in the male body. Older than language, older than culture, older than civilization itself. Stoicism asks a simple question. Who is in charge? Is it the urge or is it the man? Modern culture says freedom is doing what you want, when you want. The Stoics disagreed. To them, freedom was not needing to obey impulse. A man who must release, a man who must chase it, a man who must consume is not free. He is predictable. He is controllable. He is weak at the exact point he believes himself strongest. Semen retention, through a Stoic lens, is not about moral purity. It is about refusing to be predictable. Stoicism is built on one brutal skill, the ability to pause, between stimulus and response, between urge and action, between desire and decision. That pause is where power lives. Every time a man feels arousal and does not immediately act, something subtle happens in the brain. Impulse pathways weaken, self-command strengthens. This is not philosophy, this is training. You are teaching your nervous system one thing, I decide, not you. Over time, this discipline spreads. A man who can delay sexual release reacts less emotionally. He handles stress better, he focuses longer, he walks slower, he speaks with certainty. Not because semen is magic, but because discipline is contagious. The Stoics lived in a world of indulgence. Rome was not conservative, it was decadent beyond modern comprehension. Yet the Stoics warned men not against pleasure itself, but against excess. They observed something dangerous. Men who chased pleasure avoided hardship. Men who avoided hardship avoided growth. Men who avoided growth lost respect. Pleasure became a sedative, not a reward. Retention is not permanent abstinence. It is intentional access. You are not broken, you are overstimulated. Screens, endless novelty, instant reward. The brain adapts. Motivation dulls, drive scatters. Stoicism does not shame the man, it arms him. Retention restores sensitivity to effort, to reward, to meaning. The most dangerous mistake is turning retention into identity. You are not a retainer. You are a disciplined man who chooses when to act. Retention is a tool, a protocol, a sharpening stone. You use it until you are no longer owned by impulse. You do not retain because sex is bad. You retain because discipline is rare. You do not retain forever. You retain until you are free. The Stoic does not fear desire. He commands it. And a man who commands his strongest urge will never be ruled by weaker ones. Semen retention is often spoken about in mystical language. But beneath the myths, there is biology, there is chemistry, there is a nervous system adapting to stimuli. The male body is not neutral to sexual release. It responds, it recalibrates, it learns patterns. When a man ejaculates, several neurochemicals surge at once. Dopamine drops, prolactin rises, oxytocin increases. The nervous system shifts from pursuit to recovery. This is not opinion, this is physiology. Prolactin is the key hormone most men never hear about. It spikes after ejaculation. And when prolactin is high, motivation drops. Prolactin suppresses dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule of drive, of pursuit, of effort toward a goal. When dopamine is dulled repeatedly, the brain becomes less responsive to effort-based rewards. The result is subtle but powerful. Less hunger for work, less aggression toward goals, less tolerance for discomfort, not weakness. Conditioning. The brain learns a shortcut. Why build? Why struggle? Why endure? when reward is available instantly. Over time, frequent sexual release trains the nervous system to expect relief without effort. This is where retention changes the equation. When ejaculation is delayed, dopamine does not crash as often. The reward system remains sensitive. Drive stays available. This does not mean testosterone skyrockets endlessly. That claim is exaggerated. What changes is androgen receptor sensitivity, how responsive the body is to the testosterone already present. A man does not need more fuel if his engine finally starts responding. Retention increases the body's tolerance for tension. And tension is not stress. Tension is stored potential. Athletes understand this intuitively. So do fighters. So do men who operate in high-pressure environments. They do not eliminate arousal. They contain it. Focus improves not because of magic, but because the brain is no longer constantly chasing relief. When sexual novelty is constant, attention fragments. The mind becomes restless, always scanning, always reaching. When novelty is reduced, attention consolidates. This is why many men report deeper focus during retention periods. Not hyperactivity, stillness. The mind stops leaking. Another overlooked factor is energy allocation. Sexual arousal is expensive. The body prepares for reproduction whether release happens or not. Blood flow increases, neural resources engage, hormonal cascades activate. When this cycle repeats constantly, energy is diverted from long-term projects to short-term relief. Retention interrupts the loop. The body remains in a state of readiness instead of collapse. This does not make a man aggressive by default. It makes him available. Available to work, available to train, available to think clearly under pressure. Many men mistake this for heightened masculinity. It is actually stabilized physiology. Consider the modern man who wakes up tired. He scrolls, consumes sexual content, releases. Within minutes, his nervous system shifts into recovery mode. His body believes a major biological event has occurred. The rest of the day carries that signal. Lower urgency, lower tension, lower drive. Now contrast that with a man who wakes up aroused, acknowledges it, and does nothing. The energy does not disappear, it redistributes into movement, into alertness, into action. This is why retention often pairs naturally with exercise, fasting, and cold exposure. They all train the same system: delayed gratification, stress tolerance, self-command. Neuroscience calls this prefrontal dominance. The part of the brain responsible for planning and restraint gains influence over impulse centers, not through force, through repetition. Each time a man resists automatic release, he strengthens the circuit of choice. This is why retention works best when framed as training. Not ideology, not moral superiority. Training adapts the nervous system. Identity rigidifies it. The danger appears when men suppress without purpose. Chronic suppression creates tension without outlet, irritability, anxiety, and obsessive thinking. Stoic retention is not suppression, it is redirection. The energy must go somewhere, into work, into strength, into creation, into presence. Without redirection, retention becomes pressure. With direction, it becomes fuel. Scientific studies consistently show that dopamine sensitivity improves when overstimulation is reduced. Not just sexual stimulation, all instant reward loops. Retention simply removes one of the strongest loops available. What remains is clarity, not enlightenment, not superpowers. Clarity. A man who sees clearly is dangerous to distraction. He notices urges before they control him. He feels tension without panicking. He can sit with desire without obeying it. This is the biological foundation of Stoic discipline. The body adapts to what it repeats. Release teaches relief. Retention teaches command. Neither is evil, neither is sacred, but only one strengthens the man who must endure. Semen retention does not give power, it reveals it. The power was always there. It was simply being spent too quickly. And a man who learns to spend his energy intentionally will always outwork, outlast, and outthink a man who leaks it unconsciously. Long before modern science defined hormones and neurotransmitters, ancient men were already observing the cost of excess. They did not have microscopes. They had consequences. The Stoics understood the body through discipline, and the mind through restraint. They watched what happened to men who indulged without limit. They watched what happened to men who practiced control. And they recorded the difference. The Stoics did not condemn sex. They condemned slavery to desire. To them, the problem was never pleasure itself. It was dependence. A man who cannot refuse himself cannot be trusted with power. This is why Stoic philosophy places such importance on temperance. Not as moral decoration, but as survival skill. Temperance was not weakness, it was sovereignty. The Stoic ideal was a man who could enjoy pleasure when appropriate and walk away when it threatened his character. Sexual restraint was simply one expression of a larger principle: command over impulse. In the ancient world, this principle was not unique to Stoicism. Across cultures, the same observation emerged. Men who conserved sexual energy were more capable of sustained effort, leadership, and clarity. In Taoist philosophy, sexual essence was treated as life force, not mystical in the modern sense, but vital in the practical one. They observed that excessive ejaculation left men fatigued, distracted, and irritable. Moderation restored vitality. Control restored balance. The Taoists taught circulation rather than release, not denial but transformation. Energy was meant to be moved through the body, not wasted through compulsion. In ancient warrior cultures, restraint was expected, not because warriors were pure, but because they were responsible. A soldier ruled by impulse was a liability. Before battle, men were often expected to abstain, not out of superstition, but out of practicality. A clear mind survives. A scattered one hesitates. The ancient Spartans understood this. So did Roman generals. So did samurai. Sexual discipline was not about virtue signaling. It was about readiness. Monastic traditions arrived at the same conclusion from another direction. They observed that constant indulgence fragmented attention. Prayer suffered, work suffered, presence disappeared. Celibacy was not framed as hatred of sex. It was framed as devotion to focus. When energy is not constantly drained, it accumulates. When it accumulates, it must be directed. This is where modern men misunderstand ancient wisdom. The ancients did not worship retention. They respected containment. Containment creates pressure. Pressure creates force. Force creates output. Without direction, containment becomes frustration. With direction, it becomes mastery. Stoicism sits directly in the middle of these traditions. It rejects excess. It rejects repression. It chooses intention. A Stoic man does not ask, "What do I feel like doing?" He asks, "What is required of me?" Sometimes that answer includes sex. Sometimes it does not. The decision is guided by purpose, not appetite. This is why Stoic philosophers repeatedly warned against luxury. Luxury weakens the ability to endure discomfort, and discomfort is inevitable. A man who cannot tolerate sexual restraint will not tolerate adversity. The ancient world was unforgiving. There were no safety nets, no dopamine farms in the pocket. Discipline was not optional, it was demanded by reality. This is why ancient wisdom still resonates. Not because it is outdated, but because human biology has not changed. Only the environment has. The modern man is surrounded by temptation without consequence. Ancient men were surrounded by consequence without temptation. Stoicism prepares a man to live correctly, in either condition. Sexual discipline was never the point. Self-mastery was. Retention was simply one of the most difficult arenas in which to practice it. Because sexual desire does not negotiate, it demands. The Stoic answer was simple. Do not fight desire, outlast it. Do not suppress energy, redirect it. Do not worship pleasure, use it wisely. Ancient wisdom does not promise superpowers. It promises stability. A man who is stable is calm under pressure, clear in chaos, measured in victory. This is the man the Stoics aim to produce. Not a monk, not an ascetic, not a moral exhibition, but a man who owns himself. And a man who owns himself cannot be owned by desire. Look at modern men closely, not through motivation clips, but through outcomes. The difference between disciplined men and distracted men is not intelligence, it is not talent, it is energy management. In high-performing environments, this truth appears again and again. Athletes understand it first. Elite fighters, endurance athletes, and competitors often reduce sexual activity during training cycles, not because sex is harmful, but because peak performance demands focus. Before major competition, the nervous system must stay sharp. Reaction time matters. Aggression matters. Presence matters. A distracted athlete hesitates. A disciplined one executes. Many professional fighters speak quietly about this. They don't market it, they practice it. They notice the same pattern. When indulgence increases, edge decreases. When restraint increases, clarity returns. The same pattern appears in creative men, writers, musicians, inventors, men who build things from nothing. They often enter long periods of isolation, reduced stimulation, and intentional restraint. Not as a rule, but as a rhythm. Creation demands tension, and tension cannot exist in a constantly relieved system. The modern entrepreneur lives in a similar space. He must delay reward, absorb uncertainty, operate without validation. Men who seek constant release struggle with long timelines. They abandon projects early. They chase novelty instead of completion. Retention, even temporarily, trains patience. Patience compounds. Consider the man building a business. There is no applause at the beginning, no dopamine spike, only effort. If his nervous system is trained to expect immediate relief, the work feels unbearable. But if his system tolerates tension, the work feels normal. This is where retention quietly helps. Not because semen contains magic, but because the man learns to sit with desire without demanding resolution. That skill transfers. He can sit with uncertainty, with silence, with long nights of effort. In relationships, the difference is even clearer. Men ruled by sexual impulse often chase validation. They confuse desire with connection. They seek attention instead of intimacy. A disciplined man approaches women differently. He is not desperate. He is not urgent. He does not perform. He chooses. This changes everything. Women feel the difference immediately, not consciously, but viscerally. A man who does not need is safer. A man who does not chase is grounded. Retention does not make a man attractive. Self-possession does. Retention simply removes the noise that hides it. In leadership, the pattern repeats. Leaders are required to absorb pressure without releasing it onto others. They must stay composed. While others panic, a leader who is ruled by impulse creates chaos. A leader who can hold tension creates stability. This is why discipline has always preceded authority, not rank, not title. Discipline. The modern workplace punishes impulsive men quietly. They burn out. They overreact. They chase pleasure after stress. Their performance declines even if no one names the reason. The disciplined man recovers differently. He trains. He rests intentionally. He channels stress into structure. Retention fits naturally into this rhythm, not as obsession, but as restraint. Real-life examples rarely look dramatic. They look boring. Men waking early, training consistently, working long hours without complaint. No grand speeches, no declarations, just steadiness. This is the mark of retained energy, not aggression, but availability. The energy is there when it is needed. Contrast this with the overstimulated man. He seeks escape. He numbs. He distracts. His energy leaks in small moments. Scrolling, clips, compulsive release, nothing catastrophic, just constant depletion. Over months, the difference becomes undeniable. One man compounds effort. The other compounds fatigue. Retention does not turn a man into a machine. It turns him into a steward. He decides where his energy goes, to training, to family, to creation, to purpose. This is why disciplined men appear calm. They are not suppressing chaos. They have reduced it. They are not tense. They are contained. And containment is the foundation of modern masculine effectiveness. Not dominance, not performance. Containment. A man who can contain himself can be trusted with responsibility, and responsibility is where meaning lives. This is the quiet lesson modern men rediscover when they stop leaking energy unconsciously. Not through slogans, through results. The world does not reward intention. It rewards output. Retention simply helps ensure your output reflects your highest aim. not your weakest impulse. In the modern world, the cost of excess is harder to see, not because it is smaller, but because it is delayed. Men today rarely collapse all at once. No, they erode, they lose sharpness slowly, drive quietly, confidence subtly. And because the decline is gradual, it is mistaken for normal. Look at high-performing men across different fields: athletes, founders, artists, military operators. When pressure increases, discipline tightens. This is not coincidence. Elite fighters often restrict sexual release before competition, not because of superstition, but because they understand focus. They describe the same pattern repeatedly. After frequent release, aggression softens. Reaction time dulls. Urgency fades. When restraint is practiced, awareness sharpens. Movements become economical. Decisions quicker, not frantic, precise. The same pattern appears in business. Founders in high-growth phases often describe long periods of abstinence without naming it as such. They are consumed by the mission. Sex becomes secondary, not forbidden, deferred. During these periods, output spikes. They work longer without burnout. They tolerate uncertainty better. They feel less reactive to stress. When the mission ends or stabilizes, indulgence returns. And with it, softness. This is not moral judgment. It is observation. Creative men report something similar. Writers, musicians, and inventors often describe their most productive seasons as sexually quiet ones. The mind stays inside the work. Energy does not leak outward. Attention remains inward and forward. Sexual release closes a loop. Creation opens one. Too much closure ends momentum. Even in everyday life, the pattern holds. Men who constantly chase sexual novelty often struggle with consistency. They start strong, fade fast, gym routines collapse, projects stall, goals reset endlessly. Meanwhile, men who practice restraint, even unintentionally, tend to move slower but further. They finish what they start. One real-world example repeats constantly. A man decides to clean up his habits. He cuts excessive porn, reduces masturbation, not for ideology, but for sanity. Within weeks, he notices changes. Morning energy improves. Eye contact becomes easier. Work feels less draining. Not euphoria, stability. Then he relapses. Not catastrophically, casually, and the contrast is immediate. Fog returns. Motivation dips. Confidence softens. This contrast is what convinces men. Not online claims, not theory, experience. Another common example appears in relationships. Men who constantly release often become passive partners. Less assertive, less present, less grounded. Desire leaks out through screens instead of being directed into connection. Men who retain longer often report stronger polarity. Not aggression, presence. They listen better. Lead more naturally, speak with intention. This does not make them superior. It makes them engaged. Retention removes one outlet. Energy seeks another. If that outlet is chaos, problems appear. If that outlet is purpose, growth follows. This is why retention amplifies whatever foundation already exists. A disciplined man becomes sharper. An undisciplined man becomes tense. This is where modern men get lost. They copy restraint without structure. Ancient men had work that consumed the body. Hunting, building, training, survival. Modern men sit. Retention without movement becomes stagnation. Retention without mission becomes obsession. The men who benefit most from retention are already doing hard things. They lift, they build, they lead, they create. Retention simply stops the leak. For men without direction, retention feels unbearable because it reveals the absence of purpose. This is not a flaw, it is information. The discomfort points toward what is missing. Modern life offers endless relief mechanisms: food, screens, sex, noise. Stoicism removes relief to expose responsibility. This is why semen retention often triggers discomfort before clarity. The body is asking, what now? The answer cannot be suppression, it must be action. Men who channel retained energy into training, work, and discipline report steadier confidence over time, not bravado. Wait, they stop proving. They start building. This is why retention works best quietly. No announcements, no streak worship, No counting days, just containment and direction. The modern world is designed to drain men slowly, not violently. Retention is one way to resist that drain. Not because sex is harmful, but because unconscious spending always is. Men who spend energy intentionally stand out in a world of constant leakage. They are calmer, more decisive, less reactive, not perfect, present. And presence in a distracted age is rare power. Semen retention does not create extraordinary men. It removes what weakens ordinary ones. What remains is not a different man. It is the same man with his energy. Finally pointed forward. In the modern world, the effects of discipline are easiest to see. Not in philosophy books, but in outcomes. Look at men who build for decades. Not flashes of success, not viral moments, but sustained creation. You will notice a pattern. Their lives are boring on the surface. Predictable routines, few indulgences, little chaos. This is not coincidence. High-performing men guard their energy because they understand how finite it is. Athletes are a clear example. Many elite fighters, boxers, and martial artists deliberately avoid ejaculation before competition, not because of superstition, because they have felt the difference. Sharper focus, greater aggression, faster reaction time. When the body is not in recovery mode, it is in readiness mode. Coaches rarely advertise this publicly, but privately it is common knowledge. Energy conserved becomes intensity expressed. The same pattern appears in business. Founders who operate under constant stimulation burn out quickly, they chase novelty, they lose patience, they sabotage momentum. But men who simplify their reward systems work longer without fatigue. They do not need constant pleasure. To remain engaged, they are internally fueled. Consider the man who cuts pornography, casual sex, and constant release for 30 days. What changes first is not confidence, it is silence. Mental noise decreases, restlessness fades, the urge to escape discomfort weakens. Then comes focus. Tasks that felt heavy become manageable. Work sessions stretch longer, distractions lose their pull. This is not enlightenment, it is nervous system recovery. Many men misinterpret this phase. They think retention has given them power. In reality, it has removed a drain. Power feels new, only because it has been absent for so long. Another modern example is the creative mind. Writers, producers, artists, and builders depend on sustained attention. Constant release fragments creativity. Ideas appear but cannot be held. Retention creates depth. Thoughts connect, themes develop, work becomes immersive. This is why many creatives naturally drift toward periods of abstinence during intense projects, not as a rule, as a response. The body knows when energy must be conserved. There is also a social shift. Men practicing discipline become less reactive in relationships. They do not seek validation through attention. They do not chase attraction, they choose. This changes dynamics immediately. People respond differently. To men who are not needy for relief, calm presence replaces urgency. This is often mistaken for confidence. It is actually non-dependence. A man who does not need you can see you clearly. This clarity improves leadership. Leaders who are ruled by impulse create unstable environments. Leaders who regulate themselves create trust. Self-command scales outward. The same discipline that governs desire governs speech, emotion, decision-making. This is why semen retention is rarely the end goal. For men who mature in the practice, it becomes irrelevant. They do not count days, they count outcomes. Retention dissolves into a broader life of restraint, focus, and intention. The final lesson modern men learn is that discipline is not dramatic, it is quiet. No applause and no external reward, just consistent advantage over time. Men who leak energy must constantly motivate themselves. Men who conserve energy simply apply it. This is the difference between effort and force. Effort exhausts, force multiplies. Modern life punishes the undisciplined silently, not immediately, but inevitably. Lost time, lost focus, lost potential. Retention is not a guarantee of success, but lack of discipline is a guarantee of limitation. Every man chooses Where his energy goes. Most never notice the choice being made. The disciplined man notices. And because he notices it, he decides. That decision, repeated daily, creates a life that compounds. While others dissipate, this is the modern proof. Not theory, not ideology, results. And results are the only argument that discipline has ever needed. Modern men do not lack information. They lack continuity. They start strong. They lose momentum. They wonder why. When men experiment with retention, the first changes they notice are not mystical. They are behavioral. They wake up with more urgency. They move faster without rushing. They feel less need to explain themselves. This is not confidence appearing from nowhere. It is confidence no longer being drained. Many men describe the same pattern. Before retention, motivation feels forced. After retention, motivation feels available. The difference is subtle but decisive. Consider the man building a business. When he is constantly releasing, his effort comes in bursts. Short pushes, long recovery. He works hard one day, scrolls the next, loses the thread. When he retains, something changes. He tolerates boredom. He stays with problems longer. He stops needing immediate reward. Not because he is more disciplined by nature, but because his nervous system is no longer trained to escape discomfort. High performers across fields understand this instinctively. Elite athletes do not abstain forever. They abstain when focus matters. They conserve energy before competition. They limit distraction. They narrow their attention. This is not superstition. It is pattern recognition. A man leaking energy rarely reaches depth. A man containing energy eventually does. Creative professionals notice this clearly. Writers, producers, artists. When sexual stimulation is constant, creative output fragments. Ideas start strong and die early. When stimulation is reduced, ideas linger. They deepen, they mature. Retention does not create ideas. It allows them to stay alive long enough to be finished. Many men mistake this for intensity. It is not intensity, it is continuity. Another real-world change appears in social dynamics. Men retaining often speak less, not because they are shy, but because they are no longer performing. They stop fishing for validation. They stop filling silence. This changes how others respond. People listen. People lean in. People feel steadiness. This is not dominance, it is groundedness. The man is not trying to impress. He is occupied. Romantic attention often increases during retention periods, not because women sense semen, but because men stop chasing reactions. Neediness fades. Presence replaces it. This is why retention fails when men do it to attract. The moment it becomes a tactic, it loses its effect. Retention works when the man forgets about it and invests the energy elsewhere. Work, training, purpose. This is also where many men break. They retain but change nothing else. No training, no direction, no structure. Energy accumulates with nowhere to go. Irritability appears. Restlessness appears. Frustration appears. They blame retention. But the problem is mismanagement. Energy must be spent intentionally, or it will demand release. Men who succeed with retention always pair it with output. Physical exertion, mental strain, creative production. Without output, retention becomes pressure. With output, it becomes propulsion. Another modern example appears in leadership. Men in charge of others cannot afford volatility. Emotional swings erode trust. Reactivity undermines authority. Retention stabilizes baseline mood. By reducing constant reward crashes. This creates consistency. People trust consistency. A leader who does not oscillate becomes predictable in the right way, calm, measured, reliable. This is why many men report fewer emotional spikes during retention. Not numbness, control. They still feel desire. They simply do not obey it immediately. That skill transfers everywhere, in conflict, in negotiation, in pressure. A man who can sit with sexual urge can sit with silence, with tension, with uncertainty. This is the real advantage, not strength, not magnetism, endurance. Modern life is not conquered by bursts of intensity. It is conquered by sustained effort. Retention trains sustained effort, not forever, not blindly, but deliberately. The men who benefit most from retention are not extremists. They are pragmatists. They retain when focus matters. They release when connection matters. They choose consciously. The man who retains without obsession eventually stops thinking about retention at all, and that is when it starts working fully. Because the goal was never semen. The goal was sovereignty, and sovereignty shows itself in the man who can hold energy without being controlled by it. Retention reaches a point where the question changes. Not, how long can I hold? But, who am I becoming? This is where many men fail. They win the battle against impulse and lose the war against ego. They turn discipline into identity, restraint into superiority, control into rigidity. Stoicism warns against this. Anything that inflates the ego undermines mastery. A man who prides himself on retention is still being ruled by it, just in the opposite direction. True mastery is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not count days for validation. It simply acts correctly. The shadow side of retention appears. When energy is contained without wisdom, pressure builds, irritation increases, thoughts narrow. A man becomes tense, reactive, judgmental. This is not strength, it is imbalance. Stoicism never praised extremes, it praised alignment. The goal was not denial, it was harmony between impulse and reason. Sexual energy is powerful, but power without direction is dangerous. When retention is practiced without grounding, the mind can drift toward obsession, constant monitoring, constant counting, constant fear of loss. This is not freedom. This is another cage. The Stoic solution is integration. Release is not failure, when it is chosen consciously. Retention is not victory, when it is fueled by fear. The metric is not abstinence. The metric is command. A Stoic man can engage in sex. Without losing himself, he can abstain. Without hardening his heart, he is flexible without being weak, firm without being rigid. This balance requires honesty. Why am I retaining? To sharpen focus, to rebuild discipline, to regain sensitivity to effort, or to feel superior, to avoid intimacy, to escape discomfort? The answer matters. Stoicism demands brutal self-examination. If retention improves your work, your presence, your patience, your leadership, it is serving its purpose. If it makes you anxious, resentful, arrogant, or disconnected, it has become another indulgence, just dressed differently. The final stage of mastery is indifference to the urge itself, not numbness, not suppression, indifference. Desire arises, it is noticed, it is evaluated, it is either acted upon or released without drama. No internal battle, no identity threat. This is freedom. Most men oscillate between indulgence and repression. The Stoic exits the swing, he stands in the center. From this position, sexual energy becomes one tool among many, not the driver of life, not the enemy of virtue, simply a force, to be used when appropriate. This is why the Stoics emphasize purpose above all else. A man with purpose does not need constant release, but he also does not fear pleasure. His life already has direction. Retention becomes unnecessary when discipline is embodied. At that point, release does not drain him. Abstinence does not agitate him. He is stable. This is the end game. Not endless retention, not endless indulgence, but self-possession. A man who possesses himself cannot be manipulated by urges, screens, or impulses. He chooses his actions based on values, not sensations. Semen retention is not the destination. It is a training ground. Once the lesson is learned, the tool becomes optional. What remains is character, and character is what endures. When desire fades, youth passes, and attention shifts. The Stoic does not chase control. He lives from it. And a man who lives from control does not need rules to restrain him. He is already free.